right, so hopefully the stream is on, and then for everybody that's on Zoom, hopefully y'all can hear me. For people on Zoom, can y'all verify that the stream is showing on YouTube for me really fast? Then for everybody
Yeah, it looked
that's
like
on
it's
Zoom,
showing.
hopefully y'all can hear me. For people on Zoom, can y'all verify that the stream is showing on perfect YouTube
Yep,
for
it's
me really
showing.
fast? All right, perfect. Appreciate it. All right, so welcome everybody that's on YouTube, and for all my Zoom students, just make sure y'all stay muted for me, please, and thank you. Welcome back for everybody that's if we haven't been here for the last 2 weeks, as I was out of the country for the last 2 weeks. So now that I'm back in Dallas, pretty much getting everything situated. So we now are back resuming to our live Sunday calls every Sunday at 6 p.m. Central Time. So like I said, welcome back and welcome to anybody that's new. If this is your first time on the call, pretty much we go over pretty much the 5 pairs that I like to analyze for the week, which are XAU USD, which is gold, NAS 100, US 30, GBP JPY, and GBP USD. So I'll be giving my outlook on those for the week, and then also want to give you guys some insight for going forward for the upcoming trading week, right? So as you may or may not know, it is election week. So the election is on Tuesday in the U.S. for anybody that's not too familiar with what's going on in the United States. It is election day in the United States. So we can see here, if we pull up Forex Factory, the news events that we have this week are, of course, the presidential election, like I was just mentioning, and then PMI services. Make sure y'all mute your mics if you're on Zoom. And then for Thursday, we have GBP news as well, red folder news, monetary policy report, an official bank rate. And then for USD, we have unemployment claims, federal funds rate, FOMC statement, press conference, and then we have prelim for consumer sentiment on Friday as well. So we have a pretty busy week going into this upcoming trading week. So I do expect the market to be very volatile. So one thing that I want to stress enough during this week, you want to be extremely careful with your positions. Do not this is not a week that you risk more than what you typically risk. You want to make sure that all of your risk and all of your trades that you are taking are very calculated and also very strategic, because like I said, I'm expecting a lot of volatility this week inside of the markets, and you don't want to forfeit any profits that you may have made inside of your account simply by trading such a high level news event such as the presidential election. Now, one thing that I am looking for, of course, like I said, is volatility, but also a lot of kind of like fake outs and wicks. So it's important that you guys during this week make sure that you wait on like your candles to close, and also wait on your guys' confirmations before you place any trades. If you had to be any selective, like if you had to be super selective any week, this would be one of the weeks that I would definitely be super selective, right? All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the charts. So here is gold, as you guys know.
No charts, please.
Oh, okay, my fault. People on Zoom, I gotta share my screen. Give me 1 second.
Thanks, Mike.
No problem. All right, so Zoom, can y'all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. All right, so here we have on gold, as you may or may not know, for anybody that's new, I start with a full top-down analysis on all of the pairs. So here on the monthly time frame for gold, as you can see, we are clearly in this overall uptrend. We are very bullish on the monthly time frame. On the weekly time frame, pretty much the same story. We are having this like continuation phase off of this impulse correction and then continuation. And then here on the daily time frame, this is where things start to get interesting. So here we have this high that got broken here, this high at 2,687-ish area. That high got broken, but it never really got retested. And then as you can see here on the daily time frame, we had this kind of like bearish variation pattern to signify that there are some sellers inside of the market. So I'm interested in seeing if gold will pull back at least to this area, to these highs that it broke, just to give an overall retest. So anytime we break a level of resistance, we will look for price to retest that area and then give us an overall continuation similar to what it did here. We had a level of resistance that broke, price came back to retest, and then we got a continuation. Here we have a level that broke, and then we look for the retest before we get this overall continuation. So here I'm going to mark off this level as the level of resistance here, and I'm going to make this dark red because it is my daily, and then I can get rid of some of these fibs. But also I want to talk about where we were at last week. Well, not last week, 2 weeks prior to me going out of the country. So remember the last time we were on the call, I had put this note here to watch price here because I was looking for price to overall pull back into this area where price could respect this level of resistance, or I mentioned it could come back to respect this trend line before giving us our overall continuation. So here we pulled back to this trend line, got a beautiful break and retest of this level of support, and then we had this overall continuation to the upside. Now basically where we are at now, higher high, and it looks like I'm lagging, so give me 1 second, y'all. I'm about to plug in my Ethernet cord, so just give me 1 second. So well, we don't gotta worry about lagging. Give me 1 second, y'all. All right, so we got the Ethernet cord plugged in, so it should be a little bit more stable. So let's go here, turn this back on. All right, perfect. So my apologies on that. It shouldn't lag anymore for anybody that's on YouTube. But overall, what I was saying here is on our 4-hour structure, we have this low, then we had a high, higher low, higher high. So on our 4-hour structure, this is our breaker structure line. And of course, if we break beneath this 4-hour structure, I'm anticipating gold, so like I said, to come back to test this this daily level of resistance. So you will need to see a break and a retest underneath there to then carry that down to that level of resistance. And that's a decent amount of pips because it is on a 4-hour time frame. So that is about 213 pips if we break beneath that level of support on that 4-hour time frame. Now on our 1-hour time frame, we also have to pay attention to this structure as well. So we had this trend line, and then we have this structure point on our 1 hour. So we had this low on H1, then we had like this high point, then a higher low, and a higher high here. So this low on our 1 hour structure got broken here, and then from this area we see we had this impulse, then we had this correction, and then we got this continuation down to the downside to end on Friday. So now basically where we're at, this is a critical area where two different scenarios can happen. So this of course can play out if we have our fib from our point A to our point B, this was a 50% retracement. We could see price trickle down into this negative 27 TP. However, we also have to understand that even though on that 1 hour structure it's in a sell, this still could potentially double bottom because we are forming this level of support right here. This could double bottom and then continue to push up from this area. So I'm being mindful of that. So the thing that I'll be looking for to start the week is to see if we get a break beneath this level of support, retest this zone, and then the first target that you'll carry this to will be this level, this negative 27 based off of this 1 hour structure fib. Now, of course, like I said, if we double bottom here, then we could potentially see a push up. Now, the first area that I'll be looking to see where if it pushes up to will be this trend line. So we could push up, test this trend line again, and then potentially fall. Or if we break above, retest, and then we would carry it up to this potential trend line right here. So those are two different scenarios that I'm overall looking for on gold. But I want to let a little bit more structure form first before I give you guys like a rational or like a concrete bias, because like I said, both scenarios could potentially happen. But I'm aiming towards this sell because like I said, I'm still anticipating gold to come back and test these levels of resistance that got broken, or at least come down to these 4 hour lows here. But on my 4 hour fib here, this will just be right now we're sitting at this 61.8 retracement level. So interesting to see how it plays out during the next session. So between London session and New York, it should give us the answers to say if we're going to continue down to this negative 27 or if we're going to push up and watch potentially push this trend line. So I'm going to put watch price here at this trend line, and then if we break beneath, we will sell the break and retest of support to carry it to negative 27 TP. So the ghost pattern, how that will look, you will want to see something like similar to what it did right here. Break beneath, retest, and then push down. So let's just copy. Actually, I would like this one a little bit better. So here, break, retest, and let me do it on the 30-minute. Let's see, like this. Boom. So this is what I would look for our sale, just like how this arrow is pretty much illustrated. But this is what I look for if we sell. If it doesn't give you this, then it won't. If it is not super clean, then I won't force to sell, because that is a counter trend trade, simply because the overall major structure is an overall uptrend. So still have to be mindful of that. The only thing that kind of gets me with gold right now is because we're at these all-time highs, and I hate trading all-time highs, but you still have to have that you still have to follow market structure even if you're at all-time highs. So I'll be looking for this to potentially play out, or like I said, the next scenario would be to watch price at that trend line. So it will look something like this here, and I'm gonna put this one in green. So scenario 1 and scenario 2. Boom. So either one of those could play out. We just have to let a little bit more structure form. Of course, on the smaller time frames, if we went down to like M5 and stuff, we could kind of get a gauge. So on M5, we just had this break of this lower high point, I definitely could see this pulling up a little bit higher before falling, or like I said, pulling up to this overall trend line here. So that is what I have for gold. Does anybody have any questions about that? On YouTube, you can just type it in, and then for my people on Zoom, you can just type it in the chat box as well, if you have any questions about that. All right, so on to our next pair, and let's take a look at NAS. So last week on NAS, Anthony said, would you take buys on break and retest of the blue trend line? Yes. So going back to that, if we broke above here, break, and you got to make sure you break that structure point, retest, then yeah, you could look for buys up to that trend line here. So yeah, but that's later on in the, like, that's looking a little bit, well, not looking a little bit ahead, but that would, you would have to see all of that form out to take those buys. Yes. So that's a great question here. All right, so now let's go to NAS 100. And then last time we were on a call here, we were here, and then I had this ghost pattern, and I said to look for buys here based off of this trend line. We're looking for a price to pull back into that trend line, and then we look for buys. And then next opportunity for buys was if we broke above this level of resistance, retest, and then we would look to carry it up to this overall negative 27 TP here. And then let's make sure these are actually on point. Boom. All right, so overall, where we were at, we got that pullback, not quite to that trend line, but if I adjust this, of course, then if I put it on this closure of this candle versus this wick, it bounced right off of that trend line, retested, and then pushed up to our overall target. So that played out beautiful. And then currently where we are at now, let's go to our monthly time frame here. Same thing, just like gold. We have a overall uptrend on the monthly time frame. On our weekly, we ended the week kind of with this like double top formation. So you can see we have resistance and then resistance right here. So that's something that we want to pay attention to as well. So just like if we look in the past, we had this double top here, resistance, and then we drop. We had like another double top on a smaller time frame here, and then we had a pullback. So we could potentially see this price pull back before continuing up, or we can continue to just fall back down into this level of resistance. But of course, that is on the weekly time frame, so that will literally take weeks and weeks. So we will look as the weeks goes on, going into the new year, we will look to see if that plays out. But overall, that's still going to take a long time to overall play out. Now on our daily time frame, just like gold, we can see that we had this bearish variation as well. So we had this last bullish candle, and the following two bearish candles engulfed them, and then kind of we just sat here on Friday, didn't really get too much movement, and then now currently we're starting to show a bullish candle, but of course we'll have to wait for the day to finish for it to overall print. But also on our daily time frame, we can see that we are at this level of resistance. So this is resistance here, support here, and now we're in that overall area of price. So if I turn back my annotations back on, you can see I have this as a zone, as a level of support. So this is an interesting area as well, because we have this overall trend line here. So 0.1, 0.2, and we're sitting at this trend line. And since it's like a daily / 4-hour trend line, it can take a little longer to push away. So that's kind of why we're sitting at this area, kind of consolidating on our smaller time frames. Now on our 4-hour structure, if we have our low here, our high, a higher low, and then we created a new higher high here, and then let's put that, illustrate that here. We had a high, actually we had a high here, a higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. So on that 4-hour structure, we broke beneath this low here. So we had this break of structure. But the only thing about this break of structure that kind of concerns me is that we broke beneath, but then we closed right back inside. So it was kind of like a tested candle. So this is one of those things where it could break beneath, test this area, and then continue to push up. So that's something that I'm being mindful as well on our 4-hour. But like I said, this is an overall major level of support. So we could potentially see a bounce from this area. Now, of course, on our 4-hour time frame, if we break beneath this level, retest, then we're looking to sell it down to this next level of support. But we have to wait for that to play out, and we have to let the structure form before we make those overall decisions. Now, on our 1-hour time frame, let's drop down, and I'm going to clean up a little bit of this chart so it's not as messy. You don't need all of these things here anymore, just to make it a little bit more visually appealing for you guys. All right, so on our 1-hour structure, we can see that we had this uptrend here. So we had a low, then we had a high, then a higher low, higher high. 1-hour structure, we broke as well. Then we had a retest, and then we got that continuation down. And then currently where we are at, we had this little impulse push on our 30-minute time frame, lower high point here. So if we look at this structure, it will go as such: impulse, correction, continuation, correction, and then we had this little minor continuation, but this formed a lower high point. So now that we broke above this lower high, impulse corrected, now I'll be looking for a continuation, at least back up to this level of resistance on NAS. But of course, like I said, if we break beneath these lows, retest, then we'll be looking to sell it off. But NAS actually looks a little bit better. It looks a lot cleaner. So based off of the right now money, I could see this at least pushing back up to this blue zone. And based off of our fib structure, this retraced to almost a 78.6, so really technically considered 61.8. And then if we draw this counter trend line here, this will be your confirmation to take the buy once we break and retest this counter trend line here. So I like this one a lot, so I'm going to set an alert, crossing up. And then for everybody that's new and that doesn't really know how to like set alerts, or doesn't really understand my thought process behind it, pretty much what I like to do is I like to type out what I'm looking for when I like the confirmations that I'm looking for inside of my alerts. So since this is my counter trend line, I'll be looking for a price to break above. So breaking above is my alert. Breaking above counter trend line. Wait on retest to take buys. So even when this breaks this trend line, I'm not just going to buy it just prematurely. I will wait on the break and the retest. Now, if this was like, we're in Asian session, so it's 6:00 p.m. Central Time. If this was in New York session, I will feel a little bit more comfortable taking this buy off the break and retest of this level of support here. But since we're out of session, I want to see if this is going to consolidate or potentially stay beneath this trend line before giving us that break and retest for that buy. Because typically what I've seen, just based off my own personal experience, you'll see a scenario where like this looks like it's ready, but then it'll test this trend line a couple more times. So it'll do something like this where do lows and then during the New York session get that break and retest of that trend line. So I'm eager to see how this will play out, but of course we could get a potential buy off of this area. So my overall ghost pattern for this move though will look something like this here. Oops, no, that's too small. Give me 1 second. Something like this. And then of course, the first stopping point that I'm looking for is this level of resistance. But of course, our negative 27 is our overall projection for our fib. Our first TP on our fib, and then our second TP on our fib, and then our third TP is this negative 61.8 based off of our green zone retracement. So this is what I'm looking for on NAS. This actually looks really good. But I want to see how these next couple candles close in this structure form before I look to place this overall position. But like I said, that looks good for NAS. And then based off of our plan A and plan B, of course, if we break beneath this level of support, then look to take that sell down to this level of support here. So which will be in this area. And then you also have this potential stopping point right here that you could take profit at as well. So I'm looking for that on NAS for this upcoming week. And then once we get here at this blue zone, this is one of those scenarios where you have to analyze and take note of, because just like how on gold had that impulse push, it pulled back into that level of resistance and then it fell. So same thing on NAS can occur. This can pull back into this zone, and since we broke this structure here, this could give us this impulse, this correction, and then give us a continuation to the downside. But for right now, I'm looking for this to pull back into that zone. And then since we have those structure points broken, we can draw this fib. So this negative 27 actually lines up with this level of support that I was just mentioning. So that looks beautiful as well. And then this zero, our first TP in this blue zone, lines up with this 38.2 retracement. So I definitely could see that having a reaction at the area. So I'm going to put watch price here, because you don't know, even though based off our fibs we could see price going to negative 27, you don't know if it's going to break this level of support, this level of resistance. So you don't want to just assume, okay, just because you end up buy and your fib negative 27 is up here, that it's going to automatically just break that level, because this is a level of support. And you can see the story here at this support is every time price touches support, it pushed up, it pushed up, it pushed up, it pushed up. So the moment that we get here doesn't mean that it's going to break through this level of resistance, because it has a bounce. So price could push up to this area and bounce, just like it bounced, it bounced, it bounced, and it bounced. It will just be to the opposite side unless we break above that area. So that's something that I'm looking for on NAS to start the week. Very interesting setup on NAS, but that actually looks good. I like that one a lot. But the only thing is, on Tuesday, I'm not looking to trade during the election because it's probably going to be a lot of volatility going on. So like I said, I'm probably going to be sitting out on actually on Tuesday. And let me read some of the comments to make sure that I'm not missing any questions. Tyrell, what do you do in a situation like that when it's a small break but also could be considered a tested candle? I was confused when looking at NAS earlier because of that. So in that situation, when it's like a break where it's not like a super clean break, you kind of would just treat it with a caution. So just think about it like a yield sign. So you know when you're driving and like the yellow, when you got like a green light, a red light, and a yellow light. Yellow light is like proceed with caution because the light is about to turn red. So same thing here. It's like you gotta proceed with caution because you don't know if this will be considered that actual breaker structure or that tested candle until you get those confirmations. So like if this pushes up to here and then retests and starts to form that give you like indication that it's forming a lower high, then you can look for those sales. But if you sell here and it's failing to make a new low, then that's an indication that okay, price could it could have been a tested candle and it can potentially continue to push up to the upside. So just be mindful of that and don't just marry your trades. Like, so if you take that sell at this area, don't just marry it that it's going to come all the way down to here, because like I said, if it fails to make that low, then it still could potentially push up. And that's kind of like one of those things where I say like take it step by step, because you don't know if it's just going to go straight to your targets, especially when you got trend lines in the middle of your like take profit. So like you got potential stopping points. So even at this level of support, if you took the sell from here down to this level of support, you don't know if it's going to break. So it will be a good area to take profit here, break and retest, carry it down here. Make sense?
Yeah, I got you. That makes sense.
All right, perfect. All right, and then Anthony said from where price is now on NAS to TP2 on the 15-minute fib you just drew, the measure tool on TradingView says 2105. Is that the same as 200 pips? Yeah, so that'll be about 200 points. So technically 2,000 pips, but 200 points. Yeah, 200 points. It's just it's calculated a little different on the indices. But all right, does anybody have any questions on NAS? Let's see. Are you a scalp trader? I'm a scalp. Intraday just depends on the overall move. But one thing I don't like to do is hold trades for a long period of time. So it just depends on the overall setup. So bro, I just wanted to ask you about 2723,897. Could you go over it? Cause price broke and gave me a point A, point B, but it went straight up rather than gave me a sell. Let's go back to that real fast. 2723 897 23897. I don't see a breaker structure at that area, so I'm not sure what you're referring to. Retype your question, I'll come back to it. Quentin said, when there's consolidation at support level near the bottom of a trend, should I still draw the Fibonacci retracement from the lowest point to the highest point? You will draw the Fibonacci retracement when you have valid structure, so a new valid high or a new valid low. It doesn't really matter if it's in consolidation. It just matters if you have definitive high points or definitive low points in order to actually have the validity to draw your fibs. Corvette Corlos, can you give your entry candle confirmation sauce? I wish. If you're in a boot camp, you'll get it. But if not, then y'all just gonna have to pick up on things during these calls. I'll talk about it a lot actually, but I don't go too in detail. But all right, so now let's go over GBP JPY. Starting from the monthly time frame. Here we are in this uptrend as well. On a weekly, we're in this uptrend. We failed to break this weekly higher low point. We formed a potential higher low here, and then we got this push up. And then on the daily, just like gold and NAS, we had a bearish variation. And then, but we also tested this level of resistance here. So now that I turn this back on, we can see this is the level of support. And then on our 4-hour time frame, we are sitting at this level, kind of like this level of resistance here. So based off of where we're at, Hold on, let me check my 4-hour structure real quick. See now, GBP JPY, this structure a little tricky because of this huge drop right here. So let me see something real quick. We got a low, high, high, low, high, high. Then our breaker structure was here on our 4-hour structure. So on a 4-hour structure, we had this impulse, this correction. Okay, cool. All right, so where we are at on our 4-hour structure, we can still like have this fib here. It's really like a daily fib, but it's still forming higher highs and higher low points at this area. But one thing that I can see is that we broke on H1. We broke and retested this trend line, and we also broke this structure point here. So we might see sales on GJ this week. That's what it's looking like. So based off of this impulse that broke structure, we had this point A to point B. This played out and hit negative 61.8, and then we broke this new low. So now we can draw this here. 61.8 retracement. And then let's drop down to our 30-minute. So our 30-minute structure looks as such. We had this low, lower high, lower low, lower high potentially formed. So yeah, this definitely looks like it can continue to go down. But now let's draw this trend line here. All right, so on GJ, if we break above this high point here and retest, then we could look to carry it up to this level of resistance. But overall, I still see sales. Now, in order for me to take sales, since where we're at, we kind of sitting like right by this trend line, you will either want to see it break beneath this low here and then retest underneath to take that sell and carry it down to that level of support. Or if we get a pullback, something like this, into this trend line or this level of support here, then we could look for that sell here. So for my ghost pattern, what I can see happening, I want to see a pullback and then a drop, similar to what it did here. This will be ideal. Something like this. But like I said, if we break above here, then we could look for those buys. GJ actually looks good, but I just want to see how it starts to form out since we sitting right here at this trend line. Somebody said, when will the bootcamp program start? The bootcamp started yesterday. So if you didn't join, like you really, it's kind of late to join, to be honest. So if you really missed it, then good luck next time. So here, yeah, I like this on GJ a lot. All right, does anybody have any questions on GJ?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You draw the breaker structure line,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't print a new higher high. So
You
I'm
talking about?
confused. That exactly there.
You said it didn't print a new higher high,
Yes.
but we looking for sales, so we will want it to print a lower high.
Okay.
So you see, we broke structure here. Impulse broke to the downside. We got this correction, retest to this trend line. Be looking for a continuation to the downside.
Okay. All right. Because I would have do the breaker structure at the other point, but okay.
At which point? Do you talking about this?
No, the one right next to it.
This?
No, the line where you started.
Mm-hmm.
The one next to it.
This right
Yeah.
here. Well, no, this wouldn't be a higher low because, like when you look at the structure, you got low, high, higher low. This was the higher high. Then this was the lowest point where price pulled back to, and then made a new high point from here. So this will be considered your higher low on your H1.
Okay. All right, got it.
All right, perfect. All right, and then somebody said, Julia said, I did register. You sent an email. Yeah, you should have. If you registered, then you should got a link to join the Telegram chat, and the Telegram chat had the link to the Zoom call, and then I also put the recording of the first session inside of the Zoom, the Telegram chat as well. So if you aren't in the Telegram chat, send me an email with your purchase receipt, and then I'll send you over the link to join if you didn't join from the link from your overall original purchase receipt. But all right, so that is what I have on GJ. Now, of course, there's no like guarantee that this is just going to like break and retest like as easy as it seems. This could like consolidate for the start of the week, come to this trend line, and then fall. But overall, I'm looking for that sell as long as we get the break beneath this low. If we fail to break that low, then we could continue to push up, and then from there we will need to see if it respects this trend line again to drop. But all right, so that is what I have on GJ. Looks good. GU, let's go here. On a monthly time frame, we are in this overall downtrend structure. On the weekly, we have this correction structure forming, but we still like technically in this uptrend. And then to end the week, we kind of had this indecision candle at this level of resistance here. Daily time frame, sitting at that level of support as well, but we could see that on the daily, this is starting to form like a descending channel. So y'all see this channel like such. It's bouncing in between this channel, and then on our weekly time frame, we see we got this orange dotted line. This dotted is a weekly trend line. So you see the story is every time that price touched this weekly trend line, it bounced, it bounced, it bounced, and now we just touched this weekly trend line again, and we have a descending channel, which is a reversal pattern that lets you know that price could potentially reverse. So we could see we kind of got this little bounce here, so we could potentially see a push up, but of course we don't know how far price is going to push up, but it looked like we already started to give that push up. We opened up with a gap to start the week, but like I said, we were in this overall channel. And then also where we were at last week, I mean not last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about this, had this little descending channel as well. But then I said if we did not break above this breaker structure line retest, then we wouldn't look to sell this position. I mean, we wouldn't look to buy, only if we got the break and retest here. So same thing for like this channel. We would need to see the break and retest of this last lower high point on a 4-hour retest, and then that's going to give us the validity for that buy. Otherwise, we could still stay inside of this channel and form lower lows until it gives us that breakout. So we need to wait and see. So I'm going to put a breaker structure line there for the H4, and I'm going to clean a little bit of this up just so we don't have all of that noise. Alright, we don't need that. Alright, perfect. So now currently where we're at On H4, let's draw our structure out. We had a high, we had a low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. H1, we had boom, boom. We had a breaker structure here on our H1 with this huge impulse to the downside, got this correction, pulled back. But then just like GU, we opened up with the gap. And when we open up with gaps like this, I'm not a fan of it because it's like you don't know if it's gonna go and fill this gap. So price could literally fill all of this right here. So honestly, I don't even like GU, just looks sloppy to me. It's like on the higher time frames it's cleaner, but on the lower time frames it just look ugly to me. So honestly, I don't even want to analyze this. But since we're here, I'll give y'all at least target areas to pay attention to. Alright, so we got this level of support, and then we have this point A to point B, 61.8. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this one on GU right now, but we in between this level of support and then this trend line. So it's like you can see this like a lot of consolidation. That's why it's just not the cleanest to me. So I'm not even gonna force it. When it ain't clean, I'm not gonna force it. Now on the higher time frames, it's a little bit cleaner. Like impulse, we got this correction. We could see a continuation to the downside, but you would just wait on the break and retest before carrying it down. That's the only thing that I can foresee besides waiting on that buy to break structure above and retest like that. But like I said, it's ugly on the smaller time frame, so I'm not even about to force it. All right, yo, Mike, historically, looking at your experience, how long should we expect to remain in trades for TP, just an average in your opinion? Every trade is different, and also it depends on the pairs that you're trading, because like if you trade in GU, it could take a longer time to play out versus like if you trade something like gold or NAS 100, like you can get 100 points on or 100 pips on gold in a couple hours versus 100 pips on GU might take 4 days. So it just depends on the assets that you're trading, and then also the time frames that you're trading on as well, because the higher the time frame, the longer it takes to play out, but the lower the time frames, they play out a little bit faster. So just keep that in mind. But one thing you can do is go back and like back test the pair that you're trading. So like if I was looking here on GU, if I want to intraday trade in just like a day in and day out basis, I can go and measure like what's the daily range of that pair. So like on an average, if I just look at like New York session, so from 7 o'clock here to around 3 o'clock, we had about 40 pips worth of range. And then if I just go back on each pair and look at that, like between my sessions and between the day, like day in and day out, how big are those candles, then I could see like what's the average of that pair. So like even this daily candle here, this on Friday, it had 96 pips worth of movement. This candle 54, this candle 95. So about 95, about 90 pips or like 70 pips, give or take, on a day in a day out basis on GU. But that's between the highs and the lows. So that's not even like the full move. Like, well, that's the whole move, and not just like a session. So you can go back and back test your pair depending on which one you trade, and then you'll kind of get an insight depending on which pair you overall looking at. Quinn said, how do you know when structure is complete? When I can draw A to B fib? Your structure is complete when it makes a new high, like when it hits a negative 27 or negative 61.8 TP. And then when you draw your new fib, it's always from point A to point B. So like from a low point to a new high point. That's when you can draw a new fib. And then from a high point, once price breaks structure, to a new low point, so forth and so on. Here to learn and share said, how in depth will structure be covered in your boot camp? That's my biggest struggle. Consider enjoying it. We spend a week on structure in itself, and like my strategy is based off of structure. So without structure, you can't really use fibs. That's kind of why we get a lot of the questions asking about fibs, because structure is based off of structure. So we'll go over it very in depth on the boot camp, because like I said, without it, then you won't be able to understand my strategy. All right, so that's what I have on GU. Like I said, I'm not even about to force it. This is one of those pairs where you wait. Like this don't move as fast as the pairs that I trade. So it's not it's like one of those things where I'm not in a rush to give up bias, because it take a longer time to play out. And then, all right, last but not least, US 30. A monthly time frame looking good on an uptrend. On the weekly, had this huge bearish candle, kind of this golfing type pattern. And then we have this level of resistance that we need to pay attention to right here at like 41,400 area. And then we also broke this higher low point here last week. So we had this impulse push down here. But we want to see if this is going to be a tested candle on a smaller time frame. So let's look here. Forming lower lows and lower high points on downtrend structure. And then where we were at here last week, this is where we talked. I mean, not last week, I keep saying last week. 2 weeks ago we were here, and I said look for the pullback into the zone, and then we would look for buys up. Price pulled back into that zone, it bought up, beautiful. And then now, like I said, where we at, we have this downtrend structure, but we're forming lower low. We broke this structure point, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, potential lower high, and this could potentially give us a new lower low. So let's go down to H1, and then let's look at where we're at. So this is our last low that we got broken on H1. And we also opened up with a gap here on US 30. Now, US 30, this one's interesting as well, because on Friday we had this huge impulse push that broke this lower high point. If we fail to make new lows tonight going into tomorrow, and it does something like this and starts to like fail to break new lows and start to transition into buyers, like buyers pressure, then I will be looking for this to pull back up into this trend line. Now, if it just continues to melt, then of course the first target is here, and then break and retest underneath there to carry it down to this zone. But this is just kind of like NAS. It can give two scenarios. But let me see if there's any trend lines that I don't have on here that I may be missing. Because even on H4, this really look like left head, right shoulder, left head. Left shoulder, head. This looked like it could form right shoulder and then push down. Make this a little bit more. All right, so this one, like I said, is a potential tricky one, but I could see this pulling down a little further. But it's not the, well, I could see it pulling down, but it's not the fact that will it pull down, it's if it will pull back deeper before it goes down. So this was a 23.6 retracement. So now we can draw this here. This is a 38.2 retracement. All right, now I'm going to put a counter trend line here. All right, so watch price at this trend line. This could easily come here and bounce and then come up to this level of support. That's your first area. So let's draw this zone here. This is a minor zone. So just like NAS, I'm anticipating potential buys to start the week off. And it's opened up with a gap, so this could come and fill that gap. So off the rip right now, for the right now price, I can see it doing something like this. Pulling back into the zone. Then you want to watch price here, and then you also want to watch price at this trend line, because let's just say, especially since the election's coming up, let's just say this consolidates all the way to this trend line, and then we could see that sell off potentially. Or if it, like how we had that bias on NAS, if this minor structure fib gives us a pullback where we break above this trend line, retest, then we could look to carry that up to that -27. But since it's such a minor structure fib, it could get disrespected, because the overall bias right now, H1 and H4, is a downtrend, lower lows and lower high points being formed. So we always have to be attentive to that. So the only thing I have for right now is to look for that to pull back into this zone right here. And then after that, you might get the sell. If you reject, then sell it. But if not, then this has the potential to come up to this trend line, and then also TP1 to 0 to -27, TP2, so far and so on. But right now, the only thing that's clear is that this is probably going to pull back into that zone. But this is US 30, so that's 160 points. So that's definitely a solid move. Quinn said, do you always give yourself option 1 and option 2 for every sale that every trade that you're looking at? Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of those people where I don't like to marry a bias, because I understand that the market can give you like, if you marry your bias, then it's easy for you to just get so fixated and only see those things. So I always like to give myself 2 scenarios where I can see both sides, because I feel like that's a slept on characteristic, or like a superpower to have in trading, where like you can see both sides. Because if you only see buys, then it's just like, well, that's all you're gonna be trying to take. But the market literally prints the data right in front of you for sales. So like I said, yeah, I always like to give myself that benefit of the doubt to look for both buys and sell opportunities. Somebody said, what's good, bro? What up? But all right, so that is what I have on US 30. Just pull back and then watch price here. Before we could look for, we either gonna get the break above, retest, and then buy, or we gonna come here and then push back down. So either or. This is a critical area right here. But all right, does anybody else have any questions about any of that I just went over? CAG at $29 is major support to bounce. I'm not sure what you're talking about at CAG at $29. But all right, so nobody has any other questions. I will see you all again next week, next Sunday. So pretty much we will pretty much go over, because I'm excited to see how the election plays out. So like whether if like Trump wins or if Kamala Harris wins, either way, I want to see like how the markets react to both of those candidates. So it's gonna be an interesting week. Like I said, remember to always protect your capital. But when you have major news events like this that we have coming up this week, you always want to make sure that you protect your money first and make money second. Even though there is a lot of money to be made, sometimes in trading you got to play a little bit better defense than you playing offense, because you don't want to lose your money simply by trading like a huge news event, in a sense where you over leveraged and then now you lost more than what you potentially should have. So make sure everybody, y'all very attentive, very focused this week going into this presidential election. And then on our next call next week, we will talk about the results and how it had an effect on our overall market. So make sure y'all just staying updated with price and paying attention to those things. The election is on Tuesday. So going in that Tuesday night, going into Wednesday morning is going to definitely be an interesting time in the market. So I hope all of this was helpful. I will see you all again next week. Make sure y'all have a good week in trading. Everybody go kill it.